Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our third in our series of webinars since this whole crazy time has started. And we're delighted to have you with us today. So thank you for registering and coming along. It's a lovely sunny day here in Waterford, and hopefully we'll all be able to get out and enjoy a little bit of our 5 kilometres in the next few hours. So today we're talking something that I think is really, really close to everybody at the moment, whether you're an employer, employee, a manager, an individual, a team leader. This is extremely important to everybody at the moment. So today we're talking about remote and flexible working, and we'll have a chat about the current environment that we're living in at the moment and how we're all managing and doing within it. And then today we're also have a very important and great guest speaker in the form of Brendan O'Hara, a client of Southeast BIC for a good few years, and we're delighted to have Brendan here with us. So Brendan is the CTO and co-founder of Untapped AI, and Untapped works with SMEs to increase the resilience and emotional intelligence of leaders. So critical skills to have in a time like this, for sure. People who need to build resilience would benefit from the skills of Untapped at the moment. So those of you who don't know us, I know a lot of people have been on all of our webinars, and we're delighted to have you back each and every time. But for those of you who don't know us, we're Southeast BIC. We work in the Southeast, the 5 counties of the Southeast: Waterford, Wexford, Carlow, Kilkenny and Tipperary, and we work primarily with early stage companies on behalf of Enterprise Ireland. And we work in business consultancy, effectively helping companies get feasibility ready, investor ready, and then ultimately move on to early stage seed investment. So that is where we hang out within that enterprise support ecosystem. We're going to have a couple of polls, and we're going to have a Q&A at the end. The Q&A is available all through the process, so if you want to write in any question as we go along, I'll be asking Brendan and chatting through it. And the first poll, we'll have 3 polls, and the first poll Siobhan has just put up there, and it's: how do you plan to work for the rest of the year when lockdown ends, when the phases of lockdown end? So will you stay working from home? Will you be doing a hybrid of working from home and the office, or will you be back into the office? So we're going to leave that up there. You can minimize it when you're done, or if you want to take your time and have a think about it, but we'd love to hear your feedback on how that works. Mentioned Brendan already, and I want to let Brendan have his few moments and introduce himself to us so that we understand where he's coming from, and tell us a little bit about Untapped as we go through the morning. Brendan.
Hi everyone, and thank you for coming. So yeah, I'm. Why was I asked to talk here today? I have been working remotely since 2003. Initially, I was working in London. I don't know whether many of you remember. 2003 was an extremely hot year. I was working in London, and halfway through the year I thought, I have to leave. I've got 4 children, and I don't want to bring them up in London. So I left London and came back to Ireland with my 4 children. And I convinced JP Morgan to let me to work remotely as a contractor. I had to make it work. I went through all the pains and aches of getting there, and I worked as a contractor for them for like 11 years remotely. So I made it work, and I made all the mistakes, and I learned all the lessons, and then I co-founded Untapped. I co-founded it with my ex-next door neighbour from London. So she's in London, I'm from Ireland, and I live in Ireland. We had to make an online company. So for the last 5.5 years, we've been working online.
I'm going to kick it off myself by saying that I don't think this is true remote working, because true remote working, I wouldn't have my kids here looking to be, I don't know, I'm not going to call it homeschooling or teaching, because I'm not doing a very good job at any of that. But I wouldn't have them here if I was true remote working, I think, in my own head. So I think the current environment, while we're all saying we're remote working, it's not exactly the perfect environment for that at the moment, and the external environment isn't probably helping us either. So that's my take on the current environment. If I could get the ankle biters away, I'd say I could be really, really super productive, because I'm quite happy at home here working away. But I do miss the interaction of my lovely Southeast Big colleagues. Aidan, what are your thoughts on it at the moment, at managing a team or leading a team remotely?
Yeah, I suppose it was our first experience. I think when the lockdown was announced, we literally, I think whatever day it was, the following day we found ourselves at home. And we were lucky, I suppose, to kind of infrastructurally, we were kind of, everything was on the cloud. We all had laptops. We had been experimenting with Zoom in the months before COVID, in terms of interacting with clients that were maybe at the far reaches of the region, let's say, rather than having to physically meet them all the time. So that was good that we had some experience of it. The difficulty, I think, I suppose we have to look externally and internally. Externally, I suppose, with our clients, I think the transition with the clients that we already knew and had interacted in person with, the transition to Zoom was pretty okay and pretty easy. But since the lockdown, interacting with new clients, while Zoom can facilitate that interaction with them, not having met them in person, it takes a lot more effort, I suppose, to get to know them a little bit, because with our clients, it's not all, you have to get to know the person behind the business as well and not fully engage with them. So that was, for me and for the team, I think that's a bit of a challenge. Internally with the team, I think what we've adapted really, really well. We have, as I said, we have the tools in order to enable that transition. I think the biggest lesson for myself as a leader of the team is that communication. You have to, I use the phrase a lot, the lads will be laughing in the background, I suppose, we have to over communicate with each other almost. It's constant, and it's not micromanaging in any way, but it's just checking in with people more often than you would, or maybe you were doing it anyway in the office when you calling by or having a cup of coffee or whatever. Whereas now you have to make a conscious decision every day. Look, I must give Carol a buzz, or I must give Denise a buzz, I must have a chat with Siobhan. And it's not just about business all the time. It's trying to make those personal relationships important as well. So it's for me, the biggest lesson so far has been is that communication piece. It's kind of making that very conscious effort to keep that communication piece. And the same with our clients, it's kind of keep saying, hey, hello, we're here still to help. So we don't have the events that we used to have in the past to interact with people.
Okay. Brendan, obviously there's not a massive difference for you guys, but what are your observations and thoughts about what you're hearing about other companies or other people who are doing this for the first time?
Well, I just, I think we've gone through all this pain. We didn't initially plan on it being online, Untapped. We had an office in London. We went through a difficult times at one point financially and decided not to have an office. We then bought it all online, and we haven't looked back. We've realized we can do it. We've realized that that we needed to make it work. So everything that was a blocker, we started to address. And we found that for everything that we needed to do, there was a tool to allow us to do it. And I think from a manager's perspective, that the management of teams it's very, very similar. It's just you have to have the right tools, and you might find that there are gaps in your processes that you need to fill that are there. But I think a good manager will manage through all of this.
Okay, cool. Well, we're going to give Brendan an opportunity to give us a lot more detail on all of that and some of the tools, etc., in a second. So I'm going to put up the next poll, which is, are you as managers worried that your staff are not working as productively or working well when they're at home? Are you worried, a little concerned, or not at all? You trust them completely? Aidan, I'm assuming that number 3 will be where you'll be voting.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't sound that enthusiastic.
Sorry, I was being distracted there with something else. Sorry. No, of course, yeah. And actually, it is a great point in terms of the trust thing. And I suppose different industries. Some industries really, lend themselves to working remotely, because if you're a programmer, you can work anywhere and it's easy to measure progress. Whereas our business, it's very much, it's a project with a client that could be very short or very long, and it could be anywhere in between with those clients. So it's kind of hard to measure. So you have to trust the guys that, yeah, you're managing that project, you're managing that client pretty well.
And one of the things that I know, Brendan.
Thanks for catching me out there, Rosemary. I'll be fully attentive from now on. Sorry.
Glad to know.
I was just checking out some of the comments on the Q&A. That's coming in.
Okay,
that's
sorry.
I wasn't doing
I'll wave
else.
the next time that we're going to.
Yeah, do.
One of the problems, and I was talking to a client yesterday about this, and Brendan's going to probably touch off it when he chats to us more formally in a minute, but one of the problems that I'm having is trying to get to know somebody for the first time online. So I find it very easy to talk to, like Brendan and I and Aidan had a chat yesterday on Zoom, and we're chatting like old friends, and it's absolutely fine because we know each other in the real world and we've met and we've made those connections. But yesterday afternoon, I interacted with a client for the first time that I'd never spoken to before, never had only a couple of lines of information on them, and spent an hour on Zoom with them. Now, it was actually perfectly easy, but it's not always perfectly easy. Sometimes it's quite difficult to build up a rapport with somebody in the real world, but I think it's doubly difficult to build up a rapport. And Brendan's business is completely online. So I think it'll be really, I'm fascinated to hear some tools and tricks that might help us with all that.
Yeah, so, and it's a people business. We are a people business, which is traditionally face-to-face.
Yeah.
We're all online.
Yeah, and that's the bit that I'm finding another big leap. That and the ankle biters here at home, but that first connection and understanding the cues and the body language of people online. It's a whole different experience when you're getting to know somebody for the first time. So Brendan, I'm going to let you take over the driving here, and if you want to share your screen and bring us through some of your thoughts.
Okay, so I presume that the people who have come to this talk are there because they've been forced to go online, and as a result of that, they are beginning to think, look, you know, I'm either looking forward to going back to the office, or there have been certain benefits of working online. But either way, you're realizing that somehow you're going to have to work online, either partially or continuously for the foreseeable future, at least. So I've already introduced myself and said why I have been chosen to give this talk. I've been working online for the last 17 years, and I've been working from home. I'm going to then go through some of the things that I've learned about that. So from an employee's perspective, and then how we set up Untapped in the Untapped way, and the things that we had to overcome as an online business, which, as I said, is normally a face-to-face business, you know, people coaching other people. And then we'll end with the whole idea of, you know, what would it look like when we start going back to the office, and what are the challenges we're going to get then, because we've had those problems. I'm not sure we've overcome them, but it'll make for a bit of a debate at the end. I did partake in the previous talk 2 weeks ago, which was very much an information gathering talk. This one, I hope, will be a bit more interactive. So, you know, those of you step in if you have questions, and I'll take them on the fly.
Will do.
Yeah, the mistakes I made. So I didn't do this. I did not set an office up at home, at least in my bedroom. I didn't work from my bed. I knew I was doing it for the long term. So I did set up a room. However, I did do this. I worked with the US, and I worked with India and Tokyo. So in the morning I'd get up really early and work with India and Tokyo. Then I'd work in Europe during the day, and I'd work in the US at nighttime. I had 4 little ones. So closing the door to the 4 little ones was perhaps part of the drive. I loved my office. I did this as well. I drank loads and loads of tea to keep me awake. I don't particularly like coffee, but tea did the job. what I needed to do was prove that it would work. I had to prove to JP Morgan, because no one else was doing it at the time. There was one guy actually who was a DBA, a guy who works in the engine room on databases. Actually, he's probably the guy who chucks coal in the fire. You just don't see that sort of a guy. He worked in Thailand and no one knew him. But I just knew then that working remotely was possible. I found out what the technology was. I moved over to Ireland, used that technology and convinced JP Morgan to pay me the London salary and work from Ireland over a period of 10 years. And so I learned how to do this really well. I thought, as a result, I thought I couldn't manage people remotely. I've since learned that that is very possible, and it's a lot more possible the more that people are online. Back then, there was no video conferencing, it was all done by phone. I also learned that, at least I felt that I couldn't change my team. No one wanted to inherit a guy who was working remotely, so I risked stagnation. What did I learn from that? I learned that it was quite hard work at the time. It was not the same job as staying put. It was not the same job as being co-located with everyone else. If everyone else is there and I'm the guy in Ireland, I'm the blame for everything really. But what I did learn was that I had to take control of my own public relations. I had to get to know who were the revenue generators in the company and make sure that I kept them happy. I took control over, making sure I understood all the hard stuff so that I'd be invited to meetings, that I would be useful, and that they would call me up, even though I was remote, to bring me into the meetings, whereas it would have been much easier to take someone inside the office. I made sure that I was useful. I learned that, the very first thing one finds when they're working from home is it's hard to reach out, particularly you're going to text someone and you say, everyone else is in the office, they ask questions of each other. I'm away, I've got to text someone and annoy them to ask questions. I found out that I wasn't really annoying them and that it was good to reach out. It improved my productivity massively by realizing that. I also decided to create a learning plan for myself, and this is something that, as a manager, I have made sure that other people working remotely do, because you don't want people stagnating, you want them to keep up. And there is a real risk when people are isolated and working from home that they will stick at what they know, and they will feel at least that they're not improving. I also then think that exercise first thing in the morning might not be everyone's cup of tea, but it was a massive thing for me. I've found that, particularly because one has a tendency to work longer hours working from home, getting an exercise in first thing in the morning is something that keeps me focused, improves my concentration throughout the day massively. And it's only like I do a half an hour exercise session every day. And we've introduced this into Untapped now. We hired someone, a personal trainer, who online does a personal training for a group of us. I suppose it's group training. And we do that for a half an hour every morning. I used to believe in the power naps in the afternoon. I don't do that anymore because this just really focuses me from the first thing in the morning. Untapped then. So as I said, Untapped was born out of, initially it was a face-to-face coaching company. It was created by my ex-next door neighbor. She lived in London, 2 doors down. And it was all face-to-face. Then she came over here and talked to me about it. And I offered a few solutions to some of the problems they had. And we decided together to bring it all online and to make it much more pervasive, being able to give it to an awful lot more people by it being online. And then by using AI, we wanted to make it more efficient and therefore cheaper, and our vision really is to be able to give this to as many managers as possible. And so that's what we did. So I was working here and she was working there. We had to start thinking about doing everything online. So these are the transformations we did. We had, initially we had coaching face-to-face, we brought it online and made it all digital. We did have a trendy office in the East End of London. It was the press offices in the Olympics, which was pretty cool. But when times got tough, we got rid of that, and our office now is Slack, which I'll show you a little bit later. I used to fly over and we cycled to meetings all around London. We now do it all on Zoom. The great thing about that is we're not restricted to London clients. You know, we've got clients now in the US. We've got Accenture and PwC, both of which we have only met online. So your point, Rosemary, is that you can do these things online, and it's the great thing now with, you know, if there's anything good that can be taken from the current situation, is that so many more people are used to communicating online. They're used to using Zoom or BlueJeans or Skype or whatever, but they've got used to the idea of seeing themselves on a video, and so sales meetings now are so much more efficient. We meet people for, you know, half an hour, 3/4 of an hour, and we can do a series of them in a day, and they can be all over the world. Recruitment, that used to be...
I'm just going to stop you there briefly because we've a load of questions you'll be glad to hear. and just interestingly, one of the questions, and I'm just going to pluck a couple of these now at random, but did you feel isolated at the beginning of remote working, back when you were working for the investment bank and when you were starting Untapped? Was there an isolation element?
There was an isolation element when I was working remotely first. When I was working for JP Morgan, yeah, I didn't want to disturb anyone. I wanted to make sure this worked. I just, you know, completely concentrated on knowing as much as possible. It wasn't until I realized I had to do my own PR that I made sure that I spent an awful lot more time on the phone and an awful lot more time communicating with people.
Okay.
I actually purchased my own conference number so that I could just, you know, back then it was IBM same time, sort of Slack. Just we used that. I instant messaged a number. People would get on the call and we'd speak, and that really helped. It was, you know, all of this is about effective communication.
Okay, and another question which is related to that is, what about the lack of social interaction? How would you view working alone long term and how it affects performance?
Yeah, so I have a point on that a little bit later in the slide.
Well, work away. Yeah.
But it's really, I think working from home, one has to have a social, you have to have a social circle outside of the company as well as inside the company. We've done quite a lot of things in Untapped to create sort of clubs. It's a fairly recent idea, but we also get people, we get everyone in, not everyone, we devolve responsibility so that people can work together and collaborate. But I do think that you have to have, when you're working remotely, you have to have social circles that you rely upon outside of the company. You know, the whole idea of marrying your colleague is probably going to decrease in number.
Fair enough. Okay, I'm sure.
Yeah, so so this was one of the next points, was local clubs. What was that about? Hire your own. Oh yeah, so we hired our own personal trainer online rather than having our own. You know, everyone used to go to the gym separately. We now hire our own personal trainer online, and every morning we do this. It's working enormously well. She's doing a 30-day challenge with everyone, and we've created a chat bot that encourages people to do it. And it's, you know, I actually have all the kids doing it as well, which is great. We used to, I think back to filming. We'd film marketing content in London, and it would cost an absolute fortune. And I just think of them as being really cringy, but they've become even more cringy now because we do our own, and we do it all online. We use Zoom to record things, and we just send snippets onto LinkedIn. conference talks. Now, we used to go to loads of conference talks, and talk at certain ones. You'd have to go to various different places around the world to go to a conference talk. Now we can do them all online. We hold our own webinars. We do live coaching actually at the moment, what we're experimenting with. So every week we have someone who comes in and we're doing a live webinar of someone being coached to show people what we can actually do. So, there's always an innovation, there's always an online solution, I believe, to most of the issues that people encounter. The three key things then to working online, I believe, is you have to have the team buy-in, you have to have the right software tools, and you have to adapt your processes. And I think in many cases, processes that managers have just need slight adaptations. As you said, Aidan, you probably didn't realize you were doing certain things. Now you actually have to consciously do them, such as, going up to one of your colleagues and seeing if they're okay. You could have done that in the office, you didn't realize you were doing it. Now you actually have to make a conscious effort to call them and talk to them and see that they're okay. So our team is truly distributed. We have people from all walks of life. We have them working in some in the States, some in the UK, some in Northern Ireland, and some here. We've got someone in Belgium. We work with people all over the world. One thing that we look for when we hire people is we make sure that they are doers. It definitely helps when working remotely. If you are someone who waits for work to be given to you, it's a lot harder than to have, to be a doer. You go and make sure things are done and you take the responsibility for doing things. High EQ is, if most leaders have high EQ, but when you're working remotely, you need to be particularly good at that. And because you get much less time with people, you have to read them through your video conference call, and a lot of it is making sure you do that, and that's what we do. So our office now, as I said, is in Slack. We call them 3 different rooms. We have an engine room, we have a community room, and then we have Untapped. I didn't come up with that name. It reminds me of Fun Garvin. But anyway, who am I to name that? So the engine room is where we do a lot of the core, the core team, the people who are developing the product. That's where we work. Anyone who's a permanent member of staff is part of the core team. And the most notable channels that we collect. So if you think of the Slack groups as being rooms in the office, or each of these Slack channels are departments, I suppose. So the morning meeting channel, every morning the core team meets up at 8 o'clock and we go through the issues of the previous day and what's happening in the week. It is an invaluable thing for us. We meet for an hour before exercise, and we just go through the concerns. We allow everyone lay stuff on the table. It's the only, the main unstructured meeting that we have. We have it every day, and anything that comes up, we discuss in that meeting. Then we have a sales update channel. So the sales people are updating in there. It's a real positive channel, hopefully, unless it's silent. And in these times, it's a bit more silent than it would be normally. With thought leadership channel, that is a really interesting channel. It's one where we are trying to push ourselves to show thought leadership. So we're experimenting and innovating in there, and it's owned by, we actually took one of our coaches who was really good and gave them the ownership of this channel, and they are pushing us to use different ways of communicating on LinkedIn, different ways of presenting at conferences, and different ways to show off what we're doing. It's a really inspirational channel. Investment is not very inspirational, so I'll pass over that one. interesting content is a really good channel too. So any good articles or podcasts or TED Talks or whatever that come up, people just put into there. And it's, you know, people get involved in a community if there's a load of good, interesting, fresh content. That is a channel that creates a lot of interesting content, and people partake in that a lot. Then we have a team meeting, so every week we update the whole team, and they come to a team meeting, and we work in a, again, it's not very structured. We use Zoom, and we create work breakout rooms, and we get people to discuss issues that come up, and I'll talk more about that a little bit later.
And Brendan,
then we have,
on all the communication element, and there's a couple of questions coming in around tiredness and extra communication. So people are saying, do you find being online all day more tiring, and how much extra work in the day does communicating take up when having to work online? All this Zooming is creating problems of exhaustion for people. Now, there are two different questions from two different people, but it's interesting that, you know, to note, did your team struggle, people who had never done it before back 2-3 years ago and are with you for a number of years, did they struggle with that at the beginning, or did you guys yourself struggle with that?
We did. I think we still struggled with it a little bit. To be honest, it's I can move forward to Zooms. We have a Zoom meeting protocol. Here we go. So Zoom meetings are an awful lot more intense, we find, than face-to-face meetings. They are, you know, you go in with a very specific objective in mind. You don't have the time to walk into a meeting. You don't have the time for chat. And particularly if you're using the free version of Zoom, you've got 40 minutes. So you've got to get to the point quite quickly. Now, we've created a meeting protocol, which I'd advise any company that is using Zoom now or online video to do. First thing is, you know, you have to have your video on. And even when we go to sales meetings, you know, it might be awkward, but we do say, you know, we can't see you or something like that. It's much easier to interact with someone with a video on. We ask people when there's quite a lot of people in the meeting to mute themselves so that you don't get the noise from children in the background or whatever, and avoid distractions. So the distractions there, I maximize my Zoom window all the time, and make sure that there aren't any distractions. It's so easy to get distracted, and it's really annoying to see someone typing when you're talking.
Yeah.
Then we make sure that we create clear agendas and what is the objective of the meeting. What do we want the outcome of the meeting to be? We actually follow a debate, decide, deliver set of meetings. So the first one is a debate. It's a lot less structured. Then once you have done that, you come to a decision. Less people need to be involved in that. And then once that decision is made, we have another meeting about delivery. It works quite well. Meetings then need to be facilitated. It's an unfacilitated meeting is chaos. Now, we get quite good at facilitating meetings. One person owns the meeting, and they generally make sure that anyone who's at the meeting has their say. One thing we do encourage actually is in chat to type next if you want to talk next. That works if there's quite a lot of people in the meeting. It is the best way of gauging who's going to talk next. Otherwise, the loudest people will be the people talking all the time. Then allowing a buffer between meetings. So, you know, if you've got hour-long slots in your diary, just make sure that you've got enough time between each to do what you would normally do if you were in a walk-in meeting. You have time to reflect on it. You have time to write up notes or whatever. It's a really good tip at the end of a Zoom meeting. And I find that if I have, and we do Zoom meeting after Zoom meeting after Zoom meeting, you find at the end of the day that you actually haven't done that much work, productive work, you feel, and you actually can't remember what you did in half of those Zoom meetings. So by having that little buffer in between each, you can then go back and look at what actually happened and what you did, and then minimize your Zoom meetings. There's a record option on Zoom. I refer to Zoom. It's the one that we use. We've tried out Skype, we've tried out Microsoft Teams, we've tried out Skype, loads of different ones. Zoom is by far the easiest to use and the one that we've preferred.
I can definitely relate to that, Brendan, in terms of and the people questioning about the tiredness. That I think your availability becomes you're more available to hop on a Zoom call, and you could at the end of the day, as you say, realize, geez, I had 4 Zoom meetings in a row there. I didn't have any time to kind of chill between those meetings. So it becomes a little bit incumbent on yourself to maybe schedule those meetings a little bit better and manage the diary a little bit better. I think that's because you could spend your day sitting looking at a screen for hours on end, because it's so easy to just say, whereas before with physical meetings, you might have said, oh, okay, I have to travel to meet somebody, or somebody might have to travel into our office and say, well, I can't do that now because I have a meeting after yours. But now you can say, yeah, I have 40 minutes between something else, so I can hop on a call.
Yeah, and I also think, one of the tips in here really is to create your own communications plan, and to take advantage of the fact that you're working remotely. Not everyone, you don't have to work 9 to 5. Some people find that it's easier. I'll get up early and I do this. I get up early and I get stuff done before my 8 o'clock meeting. And then, like, throughout the day, there are times when I see the weather is gorgeous and I want to go out, and I want to go out with the kids, whatever. And I just make sure that people know that I'm not there, and that, it's okay to do that. And I think as a leader, if you do that, you encourage others to do it. And I think that I'm sure in everyone's heads there, they're wondering, okay, how do you manage people remotely if they're doing that? And again, that comes down to communication. This is really interesting here. Zapier is a company that is completely remote as well. And one of the tips they give, I've put a link at the very end of this to a really good video that they've done, and a series of web pages just on working remotely. And they say, look, which I'm sure everyone knows, it is a measure of trust. If you start measuring people's hours, that's what you're going to get. You get what you measure. If you measure outcomes, that's what you're going to get. And it's much better to measure outcomes than to measure people's time. So I
think that's a really good point at the moment, because I think companies who have been forced into this scenario, as in this wasn't a choice for either the companies and the leaders of the companies or the team members and the employees, I think that trust element is something that needs to be addressed within those organizations, because it is down to trust and believing that you measure productivity as opposed to hours. And that, in traditional, I'm going to say paternalistic, older Irish companies who would believe that it's about, if I don't see you, you're not working. If you're not physically here, you're really not working, you're on the DOS, and that, I think that is a big change for Irish European and E employees to get over that hump at the moment. And in a way, this has forced our hand. This forced working from home, which isn't a choice for everybody, is definitely pushing that up the agenda for people, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I think there's a statistic actually that people only work, when they're in the office, they work productively for about 3 hours a day. So, working remotely, if you get a lot more than 3 hours a day, then you're doing pretty well.
Yeah, and there's just in the news this morning, and probably people saw it there, the Twitter's CEO has made an announcement that he will allow people to work from home indefinitely. Work from home or work flexibly. I don't know what, exactly the detail around that. And interestingly, then Siobhan was the one who read about Cardiff City Council. So from the heights of Twitter to a local authority in the UK also saying, yeah, we're gonna look at this now forever as an option, or as a way of working. So I think companies are coming over a big hump at the moment in their problems around trust.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that has happened fairly recently is the World Health Organization, and it seems to be always in the news at the moment, has redefined burnout as a syndrome, which is work related. So employers now are having to address burnout as a disease. It's now a disease, and they have to actually make sure that they have put things in place to make sure that people don't burn out. And that's much harder to do remotely now than it was in when you see people in the office. You know, you can see people getting stressed out in the office. When you're having to do that remotely, you have to actually consciously ring everyone up and check that they're okay. Because you become now responsible for an environment you can't control. And that becomes a lot more difficult.
Oh yeah. Sure.
So yeah, I mean, what we do with measuring performance is that we actually work with our employees to create metrics. We get them to create metrics with us, and then we start to measure, you know, those. And managing poor performance, you know, we've learned that the hard way too.
Yeah, no, there's a couple of comments coming in here on the chat saying, you know, you can be on the DOS sitting at your desk in an office, and yeah, we all know that. And it's about the person and the commitment to the work, and that's a good point. And then, and from somebody else who looks like possibly an owner or manager, it's a big challenge for managers to look for outputs rather than process. There is a learning curve here, which is fair enough.
There is a learning, it is, and it's about adapting process. But I do think that it's not necessarily something that you as a manager has to do. If you do it in conjunction with your employees, then they own it. It's about ownership, ownership of goals, and I think that has worked quite well for us. And again, you know, a lot of this is about using the right tools as well. So, you know, we use I went past it. We use these tools online. We make communication as easy as possible. So we have Slack. We integrate Zoom into Slack, so it's so easy to talk to someone. You just type /Zoom in a channel, and Slack and Zoom comes up. You can do it with Blue Jeans. You can do it with all of them. Your video conferencing software can be used with Slack. We also then share calendars. We always know who's where, when. And Google Calendar is a really good calendar to do it, because you just see in rows everyone at the same time. And then we integrated the calendar into Slack. So Slack will send me a message every time I have a meeting. And I integrated Zoom into calendar. So anytime there is a meeting and I get a notification in Slack, I also get a join Zoom. So I don't need to go outside of Slack to know what I'm doing or how I find the Zoom link. So that's really useful, and I think that's a really good productivity tip. It's on desktop and mobile, all of that. We also use Google Docs and collaborating with our employees and with our clients as much as possible. So when we're creating proposals, we would want to collaborate with them. We use Google Docs. When we create in effect a contract with them in Google Docs, and we collaborate on it, and it works really well. What else do we use? We use Zendesk.
Yeah, I think as well. Sorry, Brendan. I think that this resonates with me as well, because when we started this journey working remotely for the first time, and I mentioned to you yesterday when we were chatting, in our eagerness to communicate with each other, we were banging emails to each other all the time, and inboxes were just filling in with internal stuff. So we had to make a decision, and now we're using the Microsoft Teams chat function during the day for stuff that's, you know, that doesn't have to be on an email. I think that's important as well. That there's all of these tools are here, and you can use them for what you want. You know, it molds them to suit your own circumstances. But definitely, using the chats function on Microsoft Teams has helped us greatly in clearing that clutter. It was great that we were communicating, but it was all of these constant pings of emails coming in from each other. Whereas now on the chat stuff, you can put it up there, and then you can just check back and see what has been happening and what topics are being discussed or whatever. Sorry for the interruption there.
No. Bring it on. So we use another thing that's really important is having a knowledge base. So when someone is working remotely, and so we have about 50 people now, and working remotely means you need to know how things work, and we use Zendesk to as a knowledge base. So our handbook in effect is in Zendesk. We use it also for technical support. So anytime a user has an issue, we have it linked to our app, and they can go straight into Zendesk and we can track tech issues. Internal training, such as like GDPR, is a bit dry and all that, but we don't do it by webinar. We have internal training. We update it all the time. It scales, and all of these things scale. Documents. So anytime we've got new employees or new projects going, we have we've got quite a few people who work on 0-hour contracts. So when there's a project, we employ them. When that project ends, we might not for a few months, and we bring them back on again for other projects. Those are all individual contracts. So we use SignNow to maintain documents and legal documents and anything that requires signing. And then HubSpot, I'm sure you know about, it's for sales and marketing tracking, which is really good. There's actually a really good, I'm not trying to sell HubSpot here, but there's quite a good deal on for startups, which we're taking advantage of at the moment. Then to manage our delivery for the tech side, we use Jira, which integrates really well into Bitbucket, which is our GitHub repository. It's quite geared towards coders, so we use that. It's got the Kanban idea, to be moving things from to be done to progress to done. We also then use Teamwork to manage the whole company and what's going on at any moment in time. We find that really useful. There's Basecamp is another option for that. I think both of those are Irish-based companies. Meeting protocol I've gone through.
Yeah, we probably need to move it on, Brendan, because there's a good few questions and I'd love to get to them. So I don't want to hold people beyond the hour.
Yeah. Now, the last thing I was going to address here was going hybrid. So at the very end of all of the lockdown is, you're going to have people in the office, you're going to have people online, because not everyone's going to be able to go into the office. I imagine there's an awful lot of anxiety around that. And my recommendation here, because we have tried this, and I've often been the one who's been online, and other people have been in the office. It's really difficult to do, and the only way to do this, as far as I'm concerned, is to have everyone online, even when you're in the office. When you're having meetings, I'm sorry to say, but I don't think Zoom's going to go away. So I think you'll be in the office, social distancing, with headphones on, and meeting still in Zoom.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's actually our last poll question, and we'll be checking in on that. Can I take back the screen, Brendan? Are you kind of finished there? Great, thank you.
Sorry, one last thing is I had a few links at the very end there. There's a really good Slack group all to do with remote working. It's managed by Tracy Kyo, called
Grow Remote.
Oh, we know Tracy. Yeah. What we might do is we can send those links out afterwards to the.
Yeah, we'll be sharing the slides anyway to those who were on the call. So everyone will get access to that information. And we'll also, somebody else asked us a minute ago, will there be a recording? And yeah, we have been recording these, and they're available on our website. So this, after a few days, once we edit it a little bit, it'll be on the website. So the next poll, so just the last poll before we get into addressing some more of your questions, is the next few months and years are going to have an increasingly negative effect on employee well-being. Managers need to step up and become more empathetic. Has your business commenced the planning process? So yes, no, but on the to-do list, or no, don't think we need to, or maybe you're empathetic enough already. So you might answer those questions for us, just to give us a feel for what's going to happen in the next while, and also to feed into some of the, to help Untapped come up with more of their programs and ways to help both SMEs and large corporates in the future. So that's the last of the polls, and we'll have some of the results couple of minutes once you're finished with that one. So I'm just going to get rid of that. So there are a couple of questions, and I'm gonna jump back into them. There was questions in the chat as well, so I'll try and get to them all, or I'll try and get most of the observations made. One is more of an observation here. We make a point of having virtual tea break every day at 11, with our staff, which we find good. And I think virtual coffee breaks, virtual tea breaks, virtual breakfasts, things that you might do in real life and in person are really good. And would you agree, Brendan?
Absolutely. I do it myself with people in Waterford, so people I wouldn't traditionally know be in an office with. I meet Kieran, Colin, and Laurent weekly. We meet for a virtual. So you actually can have a virtual coffee break with people you didn't necessarily meet in the office with.
Yeah, no, that's a good idea, and I hadn't really thought of it that way, because there's lots of other stakeholders and people and contacts and partners that you work with and you meet on a daily basis. So keeping in connected to them is important as well as not just your colleagues. Another question here: what was the biggest problem you've had to overcome in I presume working remotely?
I think, we're all about sales. I think getting companies to start using Zoom and to believe that that it is possible to have effective meetings on Zoom as well as face to face. And we've proved that it's possible. We've conquered PwC in the US this way. So it's definitely, I think it's that, but I think that's going to be easier now because everyone's had to do it.
Yeah, I think that those two big elements around sales and closing a sales call without ever having a face-to-face meeting, and hiring without ever meeting somebody, which I know you guys have done very successfully all through the process. But those are two things that I think we're all going to be forced to overcome now anyway, and people will become a little bit more open to it, even though it is going to be a challenge.
Yeah, I think one thing we found though, as a result of these people beginning to become more, they're more accessible. Actually, we've been able to get higher up the tree as a result of it, because they don't have to dedicate as much time. We can say, right, we've just got half an hour, we'll do it on Zoom, you don't have to leave your office. It's made certain people more accessible. Yeah,
it's about selling the advantages of it, really, isn't it? And trying to focus on the positive.
Yeah.
And I think your presentation has been very much about the positive, which is great. Another question here: is there a difference between choice and forced to work from home? That's a good question. I suppose there is.
Yeah, there is. I think there are some awful stories about people who've had to stay at home when think it's not nice to be at home. I think that's really hard, and working from home isn't particularly easy. But I think if you work out what it is that is good about working from home and take those advantages, and do the likes of the virtual coffee break, I think that will help. Tech teams traditionally love to be co-located. They learn from each other an awful lot easier. And I find that hard. That's the hardest part, I think, actually, is having a tech team online. Although they love to be online, I think the learning between tech people is reduced somewhat by everyone being online. And
that collaboration piece is kind of missing possibly.
It's the organic learning, things you wouldn't have learned. You won't learn if you're not right beside the person.
Somebody else in picking up on my point earlier, which was around children in the mix. How did you manage with 4 young kids when you started working remotely initially?
Well, I have 6 now. Perhaps that's an outcome from working from home too much.
Okay.
While I say that, as I said, you have to have an office. If you're working from home, you have to have an office, an area that you can shut off and tell people, this door is shut. When this door is shut, I'm at work.
But I can only imagine that for some people, and this back to my point earlier. Brendan was giving out to me yesterday when we were on the call, because he worked out that I said I was in my bedroom. I'm in my own bedroom because my husband is in the spare room and the kids are schoolwork all over the place as well. So he was saying you never work from your bedroom if you can avoid it. And it's a good point, because you wake up at night and you turn over and you see your laptop, and it's not a great idea.
It's the worst.
I suppose these are very artificial times as well, in that it's normally the kids might be at school and under normal circumstances, so you have that bit of freedom during the day, whereas now we're all under the one roof.
Yes.
Especially if both parents are working, I think it's a bit artificial, and it's a lot more difficult currently.
I just couldn't imagine if you had a toddler or a baby in this scenario. It's different if your kids they're people who can understand, they're at an age that they can understand, don't come in the room. But when you're having to actually physically look after a toddler or a baby, working from home must be a major challenge.
Yeah, and one of the, like, I've read quite a few other companies that do this, and they said that the provision of good childcare is vital for working from home.
Big time. Yeah, and these are false scenarios. We have a question here. What would those metrics be? Now, I'm not sure. I think we were talking about that productivity piece at the time when this question came in. So what would those metrics be, documents or email? I'm not sure if whoever sent that note could clarify that would be great. Question here, is there a software that allows managers to see staff activity at their devices? I suppose there you're going back to trust.
Yeah, I wouldn't look for that.
No, I just that could be damaging from a trust perspective.
Yeah, I mean, actually, it was interesting when I was working at JP Morgan. At one point, we were using Adobe Connect, so we were always online, and you had the effect of Zoom, that you were quiet, and so at any moment in time, people could look at you, and I didn't like that very much. No, it was really strange. You could be there eating your sandwich, something falls out, and everyone's looking at you.
I think I'd have issues with that. Aidan, don't be getting ideas about anything like
that. I'm getting loads of ideas here from some of the questions.
No. And then I'm gonna wrap it up now with the last question, and it's a really good question. Is there a certain confidence you need to be able to work from home or work remotely? I think is the word we want to use.
It's a good question. I think it's become a lot easier. I think it was, when I was doing it first, I had to become a lot more extrovert. I had to get online and I had to communicate at all levels, because I was negotiating my contract every 6 months. And now I think it's easier because I think everyone has had a go at it. I think also managers are having to take more of a note, or having to check in with people a lot more. I lost a team by not keeping an eye on, or not going to them enough. It was a team in Scotland when I was working in JP Morgan, and I was too involved in the detail. I wasn't keeping in touch with them. They lost interest and they moved into different teams. But it's all about communication.
Yeah, and then this person's clarified the question: how would you measure personal performance by metrics? I presume while working remotely, what metrics would you use?
Do you mean measuring employees' metrics, other employee metrics?
I think employee metrics, yeah.
Well, those things I think vary upon the job. I think what we do is we work them out between. I work them out between me and each employee. They are very different, and I try and get them to create their own metrics so that they own them, and that they can then stand by them. And I do think that it improves productivity massively, because they've created them. They've said, this is what I can do in the next few weeks, and if they don't, then you reassess. Why didn't it happen? Because this is your metric, not mine.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, we're going to go on to the poll results. Siobhan, can you take us through the poll results if you have them there, please?
So the first one was in relation to what's your plan for whenever lockdown ends. Okay, so we've seen interesting results there. So 17% of them are going to stay working from home. 39% are going to do 50-50 work from home and the office, and then 44% are going back to the office. So it looks like it's going to change how people are going to work going forward.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, they're interesting results. Yeah, brilliant. And then the second poll
was in relation to the staff. So our managers worried that the staff were not working when they were not at home. So I suppose a good one there is nobody is worried. So that's fantastic. 31% are slightly concerned, and 69% of all managers are saying that they trust their staff completely.
That's a good result.
Aidan voted 25 times, didn't you, Aidan?
I did, yeah. I was tapping away mad there, yeah.
And then our last one was in relation to employee well-being. Managers need to step up to become more empathetic. Has your business commenced this planning process? So 47% of people have said yes.
We're not seeing that poll just at the minute, Siobhan.
Oh, sorry about that.
That's okay. Now, there we go.
So 47% of people have said yes, 33% no, but it's on their to-do list. And then 20% of people are saying no, they don't think they need to.
Okay.
Very good answers coming from there.
Okay, brilliant. Thanks,
Very
Siobhan.
interesting.
Yeah, really interesting. Bit of insight into how everybody's thinking about what the plans are for the next number of months. I think that one of the most interesting there is that people are going to have to change how they manage and how they're more empathetic and how they manage people coming out of this crisis, and also that it would be great to see that hybrid, that alternatives available to people going forward. I think in the next 6, 8, 10 months it's going to be essential, unfortunately, but beyond that then it'll be interesting what happens. Brendan, do you have any final insights for everybody before we say goodbye? But it's been brilliant, and thank you for your insight, and we'll share it all.
I just hope that everyone realizes that it's not as bad as that. Everyone has to do this now because things have changed, but I've shown that we can do it. And if anyone wants to contact me or needs support on how to do this, the Slack group is a really good support network. There's like hundreds of people on there. The work remote Slack group, which is on the slide. And I think that's a really good way of asking questions if you're concerned.
Okay, brilliant. Listen, Brendan, thank you so much. And we hugely appreciate you giving us your time today and your skills and your experience. And check out Untapped. They're a really interesting company, and it's worth having a look at their website and understanding what they do for SMEs and for corporates. So just to let you know, our next webinar is on the 27th of May, and it's with a really interesting woman called Sharon Demel. She's an intercultural coach, and she looks at how to support companies who are trying to export. And obviously we'll all be looking at different ways of how we communicate in our export markets going forward. So that's going to be really useful. And the next in the series is in the mix at the moment as well, and we'll be communicating out to you. So when I send you out the slides and the link to this over the next couple of days, there's also an option that you can register on our newsletter, and you'll find out about the next webinars, etc., and any events that we'll be running over the next couple of months, which will all be online for the foreseeable future. So thanks a million, everybody, for coming. Huge thanks to Brendan. Thanks to the team here in Southeast BIC. And we'll see you again in 2 weeks, I hope.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Cheers.
Brendan. Cheers. Stay safe, everyone.